Greetings and welcome back to the Casual Wargamer. Continuing the trend of covering the recent Games Workshop faction focuses for 10th edition, today we're talking about the Aeldari. Pardon me. The Aeldari, or Eldar as they used to be, are one of those armies that I, as a Space Marine player, have always struggled against. They tend to outmaneuver, outshoot, out-psychic, out-assault me every time. I always struggle with them. But you get some very good games against this army. They have high strengths in those areas, but generally, for the most part, their infantry fall over in a stiff breeze. That's the counterbalance. Even so, I think Aeldari have been a little underplayed under 9th. I know four people that play Aeldari, and I think I've played probably a half dozen games, whereas other factions I've played a hell of a lot more. No one seems to want to play them under 9th. It's a bit strange, considering they did get quite a good codex last year. So let's take a look at what they get here. So under 10th, their army-wide rule is Strands of Fate, which is similar to the Fate dice that they currently get, and very similar to the Faith dice of the Adeptus Sororitas. In this instance, they start the battle rolling 12d6. You can re-roll these, but you lose one each time until you're down to one dice, or you choose not to re-roll. And these dice can be substituted for your advance, battle shock, charge, damage, hit roll, saving throws, wound rolls. It's not overly different from what they currently do. Although I think in the case of this one, if I've read it correctly, you have those 12 dice and that's it. Whereas I believe presently you would roll at the beginning of each battle round. It's a typical Aeldari style mechanic to allow them to perceive the winds of fate and tweak things to their own advantage. All in all, that's not bad. It's kind of very flavorful and it doesn't seem overly powered on this. The detachment rule for their battle host detachment is unparalleled foresight. Each time an Aeldari unit for your army is selected to shoot or fight, they can re-roll one hit roll and one wound roll when resolving those attacks. I think this is probably quite strong because it's each unit. But hopefully it's not too bad. I mean, it's in keeping with what they do anyway. It's just taking it away from the psychic powers and just making it an army-wide rule, applying it to everybody. But it's that they can do this every round. I find that quite potent, and we'll have to see how it plays out with everybody else's army rules and unit rules. Because at first glance, right or wrong, this seems quite strong. We get 2 unit previews. The first is the Farseer, which is our leader preview. Typical Aeldari stat line, from what I can see. Ranged weapons, he has Singing Spear and Shuriken Pistol. The Singing Spear has the Psychic keyword now, and he has an Eldritch Storm Blast Psychic power, which he can use in the Psychic phase. It strikes me as being the Aeldari replacement for Smite, but a little bit stronger. After all, it's Blast. You're getting 24-inch range, you're getting D6 attacks +1 for every 5 models in the opposing unit. That's strength 6. So generally you're looking at wounding on 2s or 3s, depending on what you're firing at. The AP is only -2, but that's not so bad. But D3 damage a pop. This kind of makes the Aeldari seem very strong in their psychic potential. We haven't seen what you can and can't take in the detachments at this time, but if you can take more than one Farseer, I've not seen anything to say you can't so far, you could quite nastily dominate the psychic phase with these shooting attacks. The Singing Spear is also a psychic weapon. Strength 9, 0 AP, 3 damage. Seems quite reasonable. Although I do think back to the Terminator Librarian that was previewed a good while ago, who gave himself and the unit he was leading a feel no pain, I think it was, against psychic attacks. So he could smack a Terminator in this unit and do absolutely nothing because of the Librarian. That's quite interesting ability interaction. As a melee weapon, you've got the Singing Spear and you've got the Witchblade, which is an anti-infantry, which is quite nasty. But what we're really looking at for this is a 4-up invulnerable save, which seems... I was kind of hoping lots of things were not going to keep these invulnerable saves or get these invulnerable saves, but a lot of units in 40k from these previews seem to be really tanking invulnerable saves. I was kind of hoping these would be lessened in this edition, but hey ho. He has 2 abilities: Branching Fates, which is a psychic ability. Once per turn, when you use a fate dice to substitute a roll made for a model or unit within 12 inches of a Farseer in your army, one model from your army that can use it. If it does, the result of that dice is changed to a 6. That's really nice. Fortune as a psychic power. In your command phase, you can roll a d6 and a 2+, one friendly Aeldari unit within 12 inches of the psyker. Until the start of the next command phase, each time the target attacks that unit, they get -1 to wound. Again, it's taking the old psychic powers that Aeldari had and slotting them in this new weird psychic way of doing things under 10th. The Farseer seems quite reasonable. Again, I will be interested to see whether you can take multiples of these or whether it depends on the size of the game. I think a couple of Farseers could be a potentially strong addition to a list, especially at low points, if you can do it. The next preview are the Guardian Defenders. Now, I've got to be honest. I said that in my experience, people don't really play a lot of Aeldari in 9th, but one thing that I can say going back to 4th edition is that nobody plays Guardians. Everybody takes Dire Avengers. Because Dire Avengers were just so much better. In this instance, the Guardian Defenders are basically what they had before, basic battle line troops with a weapon platform. Not especially amazing, but, I say but, they have an ability here called Defenders of Fate. At the end of your command phase, for each objective marker you control that has one or more units from your army with this ability within range of it, you roll a d6 and add it to your fate dice pool, displaying the result you just rolled. Wow. That's quite impressive. And depending on what their other units get, maybe now, 10th edition, you'll start seeing Guardians being used again. Maybe not in any great numbers, they might just be small squads, but if you can gain extra fate dice simply from sticking Guardians on objectives, that's awesome. I really hope that does mean that people start to use them again, but we shall see. It's just a shame to have a unit which is just ignored simply for the fact that Dire Avengers tend to be so much better. That's the unit previews that we got in this one. The weapon preview we got is the Prism Cannon, which is quite nice. It comes in 2 forms: a dispersed pulse, which is blast, and a focused lances, which is linked fire. And linked fire basically represents the old mechanic of if you had more than one of these, you could fire the prism from one into another and do things through that. In this instance, you can, when selecting targets for a linked fire weapon, you can measure range and determine visibility from another friendly fire prism model that is visible to the bearer. So you are literally doing the whole fire your shot into the crystal on the back of one fire prism, and it does the shooting from there. Does this mean both of them get to fire? Effectively, because that could be quite interesting. If the first one can fire, and then with this one you go, aha, he's doing it through this and fires again. That's quite strong. The dispersed pulse is basically very much a light infantry blob killer. 2d6 attacks plus 1 for every 5 models. Hitting on 3s, strength 6, AP -1, 2 damage. It's probably good for like little things like orc, gaunts, guardsmen. Your focused lance, 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, strength 18, AP -4, 6 damage. It's designed for going after vehicles and walkers. If you really wanted to waste it going into Terminators, like you could in theory, I know they have invulnerable saves, but you could deal with elite infantry, especially if you can get 2 of these firing at once. But hey ho. The Prism Cannon was always a nice strong option. It was just one you didn't see played very often under certain editions, so it's nice to see it coming back. And lastly, we have the Stratagem Spotlight, Fire and Fade. So at the end of your shooting phase, you pick one Aeldari unit. It can make a normal move, but cannot charge or end up on a transport. This represents the old Fire and Fade that some units got. Usually I would see this on the likes of, I forgot the name now, Dark Reapers. They would normally pop up, fire the missiles, and then jump back out of cover. It's nice to see it as a stratagem now that costs CP, as opposed to just being an ability they can do. It was often used to great effect with units like Dark Reapers, and occasionally with Fire Dragons. Now they can't do it all the time. I think it makes it feel a lot better. Okie day. And that's basically it for your Aeldari preview. There's some strong stuff there. I don't think Aeldari have got anything to worry about. I think they're going to be a good faction. So, depending on what else they do and what we're not being shown, they could be even stronger. It will be interesting to see whether they still remain balanced. And say I don't tend to do well against Aeldari, never have, and generally I find that's often a balance issue as a Space Marine player. But we shall see. What are your thoughts on the Aeldari with this new preview? Let me know down in the comments below. In the meanwhile, if you can give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button, that would be lovely. Thank you for watching, guys. I look forward to seeing your comments. Take care. Good gaming.